Through you, Chairman, we are now live.
Thank you, and may I declare the public meeting open at 6:01 and you got him up. The purpose of the Bayside Planning Panel is charged with the considering planning proposals of any scale or value and determining development applications when the value is less than $30 million and where there is a potential conflict of interest, or it is a contentious development, or there is a substantial departure from development standards, or it is a sensitive development. Council no longer considers these types of developments. In particular, the panel must consider development applications which have attracted 10 or more unique objections in a public meeting. Others can be considered outside of a public meeting. All decisions are published on Council's website, normally within 10 days, but hopefully we can have earlier than 10 days. The public meeting is being recorded and is live streamed to Council's YouTube page. The recording is an official record of Council and may be available to persons on request in accordance with Freedom from Information legislation, Government Information Public Access Act 2009. Applicants and members of the public that are registered to speak on an item will be asked to unmute their phone or computer at the relevant time to address the panel and to answer any questions. Alternatively, members of the public may have registered for the meeting by making a written submission which has been provided to all panel members. Once the panel has heard from all the speakers, including applicants, we will either make a decision during the public meeting or adjourn to consider our decision. As previously mentioned, all decisions of the panel will be published on the website. I'd like to introduce the other members of the panel, and I'll have them do it individually. So, Lindsay, if you would introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody. I'm a consultant town planner. Much of my career has been in my department. I think I've worked either as a staff member, employee, contractor, or an expert member on planning panels of 16 New South Wales councils so far. I have degrees in geography, resource management, and town and country planning. I'm a member of the Planning Institute of Australia. I have a mix of private clients. I'm also on another 3 panels in Sydney. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you. Emma.
I'm Emma Kirkman. I'm the community representative for today's meeting.
Thank you. And Scott.
Good evening, everybody. Scott Barwick. I'm a consultant town planner. 30 plus years of experience. I've worked in local government and private consultancy. I'm also a member of PEAR, a degree in urban regional planning, and I'm a registered environmental assessment planner, a practitioner with PEAR.
Scotty, thank you. And my name is Ross Bonthman. I'm pleased to be chairing the meeting tonight. I'm an academic planner. I have been involved in local government for a number of years, so 15 or more years on the City Council and then Pittwater Council. I previously was the principal architect for the Land Lease Corporation. Since leaving them, I have been involved in the last 15 years at the strategic and conceptual level of major developments, predominantly in this country, but also in India and China and the Middle East. And I'm pleased to be serving on this panel. If I can then go to the body of the meeting. Acknowledgement of country. Bayside Council acknowledges the traditional custodians, the Gadigal and digital people of the Eora Nation, and pays respects to elders past, present and emerging. The people of the Eora Nation, their spirits and ancestors will always remain with our waterways and the land. Second item, apologies. I don't believe we have any apologies. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. I don't believe there are any disclosures, and we've all signed the form which has been submitted for us.
Yes.
Minutes of the previous meetings. The minutes, notes of the local planning panel meeting held on the 21st of February 2023 to be confirmed as a true record of the proceedings by the chairperson of the meeting? Aye. Any proposals? I believe we have no reports for planning proposals. Reports for public items. Item 6.1, 90 Russell Avenue, San Susie. I believe we have a number of people who wish to address the committee, and there are a number of local residents as well as the applicant. Not sure who is here at the moment, but is Renee Harris available? Renee?
Yes.
Renee, thank you. If you'd like to address the panel for 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak at this evening's meeting. I agree with the decision of Bayside Council's decision in the refusal of the development in regard to the construction of the Optus Tower that is to be proposed at 90 Russell Avenue, San Susie. Firstly, the location of the telecommunications tower is not appropriate due to there being a preschool that is 215 metres away. There is also the local public library, which is also 95 metres away. In that case, it is also in close proximity to the children's playground at North Sulphur Reserve that is regularly used by families and their young children on a daily basis. Now, because Bayside Council did put a proposal in for us to put an application in last year in regards to the upgrading of the playground facilities at North Sulphur Reserve, and having the mobile phone tower, which will also produce more exposure of radiation to the families and the children, and also pregnant women that might use the facilities as well. As the local area has increased with the population of younger families that regularly utilise the playground area, having this mobile phone tower nearby in close proximity to the playground would also deter families from using the playground facilities in the near future. This concern is also going to affect young children and their families being exposed to high emissions of electromagnetic radiation, which would be detrimental to the health of both the young children and the residents in the local area. As we have our substation behind us, but then as well as having substation, we're also going to have a mobile phone tower that's also going to be transmitting high radiation into our households, our backyards, playground areas, library, which is quite dangerous. Secondly, the proposed development height of the tower in a low density residential area will be quite obtrusive and visually prominent in the local area. As a result of this, it will greatly devalue the properties in our area, including my own property and those within the neighbourhood, resulting in difficulties with selling our own properties in the near future. Because of the structure of the tower, it will be an eyesore as it is directly in the back view of my property. And as a result of this, the proposal to build a 25+ metre Optus tower will most definitely overshadow my property in the proposed location, as well as the local neighbours as well. The visual impact from the proposed facility is unacceptable, as the development is incompatible with the residential character of the local area. It is also an extreme intrusion of our visual landscape. Because of the height of the tower is that of a 7-storey building, it will be greatly visible from the top of Rocky Point Road all the way to Russell Avenue. Finally, I would like to state that this telecommunication facility is not in the public interest of the San Susie residents and myself, due to the reasons that I have raised with you in this evening's meeting.
Renee, thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Anastasia Fispis, are you available, Anastasia? No. Then the other listing name I have is Gina Karagianis. Gina, would you like
Yes, it's Jenna. Thank you. Hello, panel, and thank you. Look, I am together with Angela. I'd like to know how many milliwatts per meterage are going to be emitted from this tower. I'm pro technology, so I'm not anti-technology, but the emissions from this tower, I would like to know a little bit more about what is it going to be used for the 4G network or the 5G network? Does anyone on the panel can answer that?
I'll ask any of the staff if they have a comment. If not, then when we have the applicant, we may be able to ask that, or have you asked that question?
No, I haven't. Okay, so basically I'll just reiterate with what Angela had to say. Look, the studies that have been done with the Swedish University shows that the frequencies used with the smaller wavelengths of the 5G tower are very, very hazardous, carcinogenic, and they do emit exceeding emissions which can cause cancer and various, behaviour like fatigue, and particularly for young youth and the elderly. So yes, my main concern is how many milliwatts per meterage are being emitted for this Optus tower, and whether or not we can omit the carcinogenic effects of this tower. So I'm also pronto Angela Lazari. This is pronto to not construct it. I think it's going to be very detrimental to our community. There's a lot of elderly and there's also a lot of youth in the neighbourhood here, and I would just like to know from the people who are the people who are from Optus what they'll be using it for. So yeah, just the unacceptable emissions. That's pretty much all I want to say. Thank you.
If you could stay on the line, we might get you to very briefly ask that question of the applicant, if it's briefly furthers. So the applicant, I don't believe there are any other speakers other than the applicant, and the applicant is Ben Dwyer. Is Ben available?
Yes, I am here.
Ben, thank you. And if you would like to address the committee initially, and then there may be questions from the panel to you, and you perhaps have heard Gina was asking a question which you may, Jenna.
Thank you.
Sorry, you may wish to respond to that question as well.
Absolutely. Happy to answer any questions.
Does the panel have any questions of Ben?
Well, has
Yes.
been presentation, or is he just asking?
Well,
Need a few questions.
Okay, that's fine.
Ben, I mean, did you wish to make a presentation, Ben?
If I could please, Mr. Chairperson.
So like the others, you have 3 minutes.
Not a problem. So my name is Ben Dyer. I'm a planner, member of the Planning Institute of Australia. Over 20 years experience in local government and private practice, working for Service Stream, and we represent ATM, which has recently been rebranded to Indara, also Optus, to secure and develop this replacement site for their network. Important point there is that this is a replacement, not a new site, which I'll just touch on very shortly. Appreciate the opportunity to address the panel. From the officer's report and recommended reasons for refusal, I think there's two main issues that I'd like to address, but of course happy to answer any questions related to EME or anything else from the panel at the end of this. First issue raised in the report is the site location, so the suitability of the site. I'm sure you can appreciate finding a suitable site for a telecommunications facility is a complex process and can be extremely challenging. In this case, we considered 12 different site candidates, which led us to settle on this site as the most suitable candidate. There are many reasons why other candidates are dismissed. These can include, and did include in this case as well, property owners not being interested in entertaining a lease on part of their site, so unable to secure tenure on the site, the unsuitability of a site for radio frequency coverage, EME issues, engineering or construction issues with the site, or generally unsuitable from a planning perspective, and that can include matters relating to the environment, heritage, or community issues. I acknowledge that this site isn't in an industrial or commercial area. However, it is on an infrastructure zoned lot, which I think is important to stress. And this, by its very nature, would be considered by most people to be a suitable location for infrastructure, including telecommunications infrastructure. Having said this, there are many other factors to be considered to determine suitability, of course. Acknowledge that. We are proposing to install this monopole at the rear of an existing high voltage substation, which I consider to be a much higher impact infrastructure use than our proposed telecommunications facility as a use type. There are dwellings adjoining the rear of the substation site, of course. However, we have sited the facility as far away as we possibly could from these dwellings in the corner of the site that abuts the park. It's also substantially further away from dwellings than the current site that we're replacing, which is on corner of Rocky Crossing Road and Russell Avenue. And that site is only about 6 metres away from dwellings. It's actually also in the same alignment as this site, so it's set back from Russell Ave pretty much exactly the same distance as this monopole development is proposed to be set back from Russell Ave, albeit that this one will be further away from dwellings than the current site is. All of the immediately surrounding dwellings have their main aspect towards either Russell Ave or Clairview Ave, not towards the substation or proposed monopole location. In fact, we've managed to locate the facility some 60 metres from that closest street, Russell Ave. If it weren't for the issues created by the high voltage transmission lines associated with the substation, we would have proposed to site the monopole an even greater distance back. That brings me to the second issue, which I need to address, which is visual impact. The substation already features a large number of tall vertical elements in the form of high voltage power poles for the transmission lines. The visual character of this site is already dominated by the substation and those associated vertical infrastructure up to 20 metres tall. We're proposing a structure with a maximum overall height of 29.52 metres at the highest point. Whilst our structure is taller, it will not look too out of place in this skyline because of that existing vertical infrastructure. It's important to remember that the antennas on top of these monopoles work by line of sight to mobile devices. So whilst we often get a lot of objections to towers being taller than surrounding structures, the fact is, of course, that they must be taller than those surrounding structures to achieve that line of sight to surrounding streets, homes, businesses, and mobile devices. The proposed height has been selected by engineers to be as low as possible while still achieving the necessary coverage of this area and to gain clearance for the signals above the surrounding trees and substation infrastructure, which is all quite substantial in that area. The monopole and head frame have been designed to be as compact as possible to support the number of antennas and ancillary equipment needed to provide continued and improved coverage for this area. And the facility will also be partly screened by the adjoining park vegetation, substation facilities, and of course all the surrounding buildings. Just a couple of important points to consider in conclusion. This site is a replacement site, as I said, for that existing facility. Once that site is decommissioned, there would be a substantial loss of coverage for this area from Optus if a replacement site isn't approved. The setback is the same as that for the current site, as I mentioned before. So the two alignments that we're proposing for the current versus the new site are almost identical. And as I said, this proposed site is further away from more dwellings than the current site. So I appreciate your time and consideration and happy to answer questions.
And just if you wouldn't mind initially, could you just respond to the question that was raised about the emissions?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. So we are proposing
frequencies. Sorry, Ben, what frequencies? Is it going to be a 5G tower? What is it, the frequencies we're actually using and replacing here?
Yeah, so the antennas on this proposal will be 3G, 4G and 5G. So we will have all of those covered by this facility.
Wow. I'm concerned because I do know, as I explained before, I am pro-technology. I'm a technologist, so I'm just concerned that the waves and the exposure from the 5G are really dangerous, and we are just knowing now about the research that's been done by Swiss University about it being carcinogenic, and it does emit frequencies. Can we get an idea of what milliwatts per square metre we're looking at for this? Because I know 1 milliwatt per 1 metre is safe, but I think we're doing something around 600 milliwatts by the sounds of things, if it's going to be a 5G antenna as well.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate the concerns in relation to electromagnetic emissions. That's a very heavy regulated area, as you're probably aware. PANZA sets some very high standards for Australian facilities for all of the telcos that are required to be met. That's overseen by ACMA. And it's based on standards from the World Health Organization. So they're not standards that any of the telcos have proposed. They're not standards that we've had any of paid consultants to get involved in. These World Health Organization standards that have been adopted by the Australian government, and all telcos are required to ensure that we're below the maximum emitted emissions from an electromagnetic emission point of view for any facility at any point where a member of the public may have access. So obviously immediately surrounding an antenna, yes, there is obviously higher levels of energy than would be safe for someone to be in, for a long period of time. But as you get further away from the antennas, of course, those levels do reduce quite quickly and become safe in terms of those levels that are set by the government. So the standard that is set, we have to then produce modelling that shows what the actual levels that we're proposing will be, and the levels that we have to model are the maximum that all of those antennas, if they were all operating at maximum power at the same time, would be emitting. So it's really important to understand that towers these days, they're not like the old antennas where they're always running at full power. They only run at the power required for the number of connections and the level of data that's being transmitted. So it's not a case of even the levels that we've got in the modelling reports here will be achieved. It's extremely rare for a tower to run at maximum capacity at any point, because obviously they're designed to have some headroom built into those. So there is a report that is produced for this site. I think that was attached to the planning officer's report. It was certainly included with the application and is also available on the RFNSA website for any member of the public to view. And it calculates a percentage of the maximum emissions that are permitted to be, I guess, received by a member of the public or a location on the landscape, and all of those emissions are well below the 100% level, which is the maximum that we can emit that is still considered safe. So the maximum calculation that report determines is 3.22% out of 100%. So 100% is the maximum permitted, which is still considered safe by the Australian government, and the maximum that any member of the public will be exposed to by this facility will be 3.22%. So a very, very small amount of EME in comparison to the maximum safe allowable level. Does that explain it, I guess, in layman's terms enough for everyone?
Not really, no.
No?
I'd measure this stuff with milliwatts, and I mean, I will say this, and I mean, it was just interesting that once upon a time governments used to find smoking okay too, and the World Health Organization thought Chesterfields were fine. But that was once upon a time, and look what's happened now. And look, this is all, I mean, the 5G is quite new still, and we're still finding the repercussions of these frequencies and the emitting of them, even in our neighbourhoods. So yes, it's I will look into that report. I didn't get that with I didn't.
We've allowed this to run on for a longer time, hopefully to get a reasonable amount of dialogue. In the meantime, Anastasia, I gather you now have connected through.
Yes.
And if you have, please, a very brief comment to add that, in fact, is different than the previous ones, that would be very welcome. Because I'd like to throw this open to the panel members rather than continue further repetition of the same information.
Okay. Well, I have more detail, but I'll just give you the 3 main points which I've summarised, like the concerns. So I'll just read them out. First of all, health and safety concerns due to the proximity of the tower and high frequency radio waves with associated radiation. Point 2, I'll just finish my points. It is unsightly and a blemish on the landscape, a tower about 27 metres high, devaluing properties in our area, and this proposal aims to install one next to a park where children play. Just between Sandringham Street and Russell Avenue, there are families with 16 children just in our side of the street, which will be exposed to this radiation, not counting any other streets. And the Knowles Seaford Reserve, which is the park sitting adjacent to the proposed tower, was signposted to be developed by the council to be a playground for children. We now see the sign has been abruptly removed. Why is that? And my 3rd point, we already have several mobile phone towers in the near vicinity, 1 block away on the corner of Rocky Point Road and Russell Avenue on top of supermarket Superbarn, where we have several antennas and radio faces. And across the road, from the supermarket is the pool shop, which already has multiple radio faces and antennas. Then we have Jamison Lane, also about 100 metres away with towers. Then in the neighbouring suburb Ramsgate, we have several on top of PRD Nationwide, on top of Ramsgate RSL. So why do we need more towers and more radiation? Now, the rest of my speech is talking about some studies which were done, which showed that the risk of new cancer cases was 3 times higher among patients or persons who lived at a distance less than 400 metres from cellular telephone antennas. And also with the new higher frequency 5G waves, they have higher energy, so the potential to cause damage to human DNA is higher. The risk of cancers and tumours, which can take years to develop as the damage is cumulative. So I have other studies, but I won't go into them. But my concluding comment is that everyone has a responsibility to themselves and to the community to ensure public health safety and question the actions of telecommunications, which indiscriminately place these structures without really doing proper research into people's safety, or they're not concerned with this aesthetics, but are primarily driven by profits and outdoing their competitors. So that's briefly what I was going to say. I won't go into the other.
Thank you very much, Anne, for waiting. I'd like to see if there are any questions the panel have to the applicant, and then I will attempt to progress this meeting.
No questions from me, thanks.
All me, Chairman.
Thank you.
So there are no questions. The panel has inspected the site and read the reports, listened to the comments from the residents and from the applicant. We will make a decision later this evening, which will be available within hopefully 48 hours of this meeting, maybe a little longer, but as soon as possible, and will be available on the website. With that, that concludes the public component of the meeting, and I declare this meeting closed at 6:30.
Thank you, panel.
The live streaming will also cease at this point.
Thank you.